This is WTVS Channel 56 in Detroit.
Hello, I'm Jack Shaheen, and I am an Arab American. Like most Americans with Arab roots, I do not own a party store or a gas station. The fact is, Arab Americans are just like any other Americans. Some are rich, some poor. They are politicians, scientists, mechanics, and basketball players. Some are Christians, others Muslim. Sadly, there are harmful and hurtful stereotypes about minorities and ethnic groups in our country, especially of Arab Americans and Arabs. We see caricatures, for example, of Arabs as terrorists, Arabs as excessively rich, Arabs as harem maidens. The Arab has become today's boogeyman. Now, in the next 90 minutes, we're going to debunk some myths and set the facts straight. We'll try to get answers to some tough questions about why so many Americans have so many misperceptions about Arabs and Arab Americans. And we'll answer another question. So what? Why should you care about stereotypical portraits? How will what you see and hear tonight affect you? Now, first you're going to see stories of 3 Arab Americans. Then you'll listen in on a discussion by Arab Americans and others about some critical issues. So please, stay with us.
Seeing an Arab individual in an airport triggers in the minds of some people feelings of fear.
Oil, first thing I think about. And then after that, I think about grocery stores.
My impression is that the stereotypes, the Dearborn Arab Americans, the Chaldeans, those kind of people are quite different than what I know to be true.
My name is Huwaida Fawaz. I'm unemployed with Access, which is the Arab Community Center for Economics and Social Services in Dearborn, and I run the drop-in social service unit in the main office. I'm the supervisor there.
This is a federal surplus food program. We give this out once a month at our agency. We serve people that are Dearborn residents. We give out such things as flour, cornmeal, butter, egg mix. On other occasions, we have peanut butter, canned. On other occasions, we have canned chicken, beef. People don't usually like that because it's not kosher, so they don't take that. For it to be kosher, it has to be killed a certain way. They pray over it and kill it a certain way, and it shouldn't suffer. So therefore, if it does suffer and it's not killed and it's not prayed over, then obviously it's not kosher and people don't eat it. So
I also help assist people in trying to get them public assistance. Maybe they're in trouble, they have gas shut off. We look at different other organizations that might assist them. Eviction notices, we try to help them to stay in their home, or if they are homeless, try to get them into a shelter and then eventually get them into their own home.
We have been getting actually a large number of recent immigrants, and we have been helping them out. We ask that they present at least their passports for us, and we understand that they're coming here. That they come in, they show, at least let us know where they're staying.
You know, you think about world hunger, and it's right here happening, right in your own backyard. People are unemployed. People that are too proud to say maybe they don't have enough to eat, or because they've been unemployed, or maybe the public assistance they're receiving is not enough.
I'm calling a client right now on the other line, and I'm going to conference call her because the supervisor refuses to speak to me. Hello. فاطمة هيدي مسز هانسون على الخط الثاني.
I can speak Arabic now all over again, much better than I did before. And I also felt better about being an Arab.
He's explaining to me that all his children were born in this country, and they're all American citizens, including himself. And he was working. He had a very good job with Chrysler's, but the plant shut down and he was laid off of work permanently. He had nowhere to turn. He figured maybe he can live in Lebanon. It would be easier for him. He tried to live there for 2 years, but due to the war, he was just from just from one house to another because their homes would get bombed. So they worked out. It was hard to get visas. He worked something out and came back here, and now he's finding it even rougher here. Most of the people that face trouble, the first thing that hits them, because they don't know anywhere else to go, is they do come to Access, and if we can't help them, we try to direct them in a direction where someone else can help them.
You want to be able to say, we had this family, and this family was out on the street.
Sure.
And when we tried to put them into a place, we had to go through this whole red tape circle, and so they were out on the street. And it's supposed to be an emergency program. If it's a real emergency, you don't got time to go through a 10-day process.
I got to know the people, my people, and I started to also understand the different problems that were in the community, maybe unemployment, or the different prejudice that people were faced with, which I really didn't understand at first.
My name is Terry Awal. I am a board member with the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, formerly the director of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee.
I don't know if it's a good idea to invite people to give talks about their ethnic backgrounds at all, because it ruins my opinion. I've got my mind made up already, and I don't like to have it changed. I know who the Arabs are, and I know who everyone else is. And I thought Joe and Mike Fickney were good Italian guys, and they turned out to be Lebanese.
I heard about this organization about 8 years ago, and I became interested because although there is a lot of freedom in this country, there is a lot of liberty, there was always a misconception about the Arab.
As soon as you see someone for the first time, you already make your mind up as to whether they're okay. Well, our speaker is okay, Terry Awal, and very nice to talk to, and just terrific. And you can't associate her in any way with what goes on in the Middle East. Let's give Terry Awal a big hand.
We tried to correct the image that was bestowed upon us. We tried to introduce the real Arab.
A person like me is not considered to be an Arab. In fact, people in the Arab country, in the Arab community could tell you, when you meet somebody for the first time, they think you're an exception to the rule. Oh, but you're nice for an Arab. I mean, you hear that over and over again.
A lot of this discrimination against Arabs comes from ignorance. And to counter this ignorance is you educate people.
For some reason, I've noticed that the Arab people, if you will, have taken over, not taken over, but have large concentrations in Dearborn and some of the other areas. And you think that that concentration might be responsible for some of the negativism that you've been talking about?
There is a misconception, first of all, on this. There is 250,000 to 300,000 Arab in the Michigan area. Only 20,000 live in Dearborn.
I told Terry that I'm sorry we didn't have lamb for lunch. She doesn't like lamb.
And I don't like grape leaves either.
What kind of Arab do we have here?
Through these fields of destruction, baptisms of fire, I've witnessed your suffering as the battle raged high.
In 1972, the problems in the West Bank and Gaza Strip were escalating. Schools were closing every other day. And my parents wanted to bring the family in here to the United States. My older sister and I were brought in first. We lived with my grandmother for a couple of years. Afterward, in 1973, after the 1973 war, my parents and the rest of my family joined us in this country. The first year was a difficult year. The language, although I studied English throughout my life, but I never practiced the language, so it was, communication was very hard.
Michael George used to talk about Americanization. The great godfather of the Chaldean community used to speak about Americanization. He used to say we need 2 generations of minimum to Americanize just the treatment, for instance, on the part of the Arab culture, traditional treatment of females. Now you're not going to say that isn't different.
Well, it is different. You know, so the female in some areas, it depends where you come from. We have 22 different countries. Some of them are as Western could be, and some of them as traditional. I was called to be on a TV panel by a local station in Detroit to discuss discrimination.
See, the difference is an accommodation both on your part and the part of American culture to the differences that you see here and we see in Arabic people. That will be accommodated. I have no question that there won't be assimilation, there will be accommodation, but not for blacks.
You're right.
So there's an enormous difference there.
Well, in fact, some of our Arabs who happen to be of black origin, because you have to remember, 72% of the Arab countries are in Africa.
Yes.
So there is a lot of Arabs that no matter how much they try, they're going to be discriminated against because of their color. So I was called to represent the Arab point of view on this panel. It was half-an-hour forum to discuss discrimination and to discuss the future of racism in the metropolitan area. Committee. In 1989, the number of attacks on Arab American grew at least 30%. That goes from burning.
Every semester, Terry Awal comes and speaks to my contemporary American media class.
I don't know if this is going to sound racist or not, but is the majority of Arabs, do they own party stores?
No, but if you look at immigration in the past, the Jewish community did the same thing when they first immigrated here, Italian, Irish, and on and on. It's a mean to obtain a living.
I bring her in because my students have 3 real negative perceptions about Arabs. They're either bombers, billionaires, or belly dancers.
When I see things in the media, be it the paper or on television, that have a negative slant toward the black community, I tend to fire off a letter. And so what does your organization do when there's...
That's one of the things we do. We meet with people. We meet with several people in the media. We send letters. We have letters campaign.
Do Arabs consider themselves a part of the minority groups, or do they consider themselves
in the federal, classification, we are a Caucasian. We are not a minority group. We do not fit the criteria.
Why is there such animosity towards the Arabs? Why were they chosen as a whipping boy?
We're a damn thing. We're a society that likes changes, and right now we're the focus. I adopted this country, and this country, I believed, adopted me. Yet in the view of some people, because of my ancestries, I am not American enough for them. I used to receive a letter almost every day or every time my name appeared in the paper. I used to call them love letters. They went explicitly as they said, I need a bullet to my head, which the FBI took seriously because other people in our organization indeed died because they advocate the Arab cause. I believe as bad as the discrimination is in this country, we are giving the right to fight this discrimination. And that's what keeps me fighting, and that's what keeps a lot of us fighting. It's not because we want to we are proud of our ethnicity. We are proud of this country as well. We're part of this country. And once one group is down, the whole community is down, the whole country is down.
name is Wissam Saadin Anouti. I work for a place called Hallmark. We into home improvement. My main job is repairing screens, glass, windows, installing them, and I've been working with them since May 15th. I've been in the United States for 5 years. I came here as a student on a student visa, and I was living with my brother and his wife.
The way I met my husband is at my place of employment, which is Access. He came in to see his sister-in-law. His sister-in-law also worked with me, and he was interested. He asked if he can get to know me.
Here, wipe it with let me wash this for you, and you can wipe them.
First time I said no, I'm not interested. And then he asked again, and I explained to him that he would have to, as he already knows, has to come and see me at my home and, ask my parents' permission. And he says, okay, but my parents are coming in a couple weeks for a visit. Why don't we wait? Which is better. And I said, sure, that's actually, my parents won't let you without your parents. So we were allowed to court for a year. Of course, under the supervision of my parents. After a year, we decided that, yes, we were right for each other, planned our wedding, and got married. We're really close, our family. I'm so glad to see that my husband also got along very well with my family, and they got along very well with him. Now I have a son. My mom, she watches him all the time, and my mom prepares the food. We all eat together. We work together all the time until it's bedtime, and then everybody just kind of goes their own. We go upstairs, and they just stay downstairs, but all the time we're together.
No nappy. Okay.
Come on, look at this mess you're making here. Okay, so you might as well.
You're too big for me. You think I have a large mouth?
Not as big as Daddy's, eh? I'm Richard Ankeny. I've been Dearborn police officer for approximately 14 years. Prior to being in Dearborn Police Department, I was in the United States Marine Corps.
Hey, look, she's using a cloth. Wipe her mouth.
My brother won the Medal for Valor in Vietnam. My uncles fought in Normandy. My father was involved in the Manhattan Project regarding the atomic bomb. I'm not a civil rights activist. I never was. I was just Richard Ankeny, just an ordinary guy. I mean, just ordinary. Just trying to get through the day like every other working class man.
Bye. See you later.
See you tonight, eh?
Car 5X is Ankeny.
There was a time in my life where I was not sensitive to the Arab American issue. Primarily when I lived in Detroit, I never perceived an Arab as a problem or looked upon as anti-American. It's primarily when I started working in Dearborn, where I started becoming sensitive to it. And it started when I worked the Arab section of Dearborn.
It's a very different feeling down in the South End. You feel like you've really left Dearborn. It's pretty drab, pretty bleak. You see Arabic writing, you see a mosque, you see a union hall across the street. There's a smell of all these kind of exotic smells of curry, and it's two different cultures, two different worlds, really, trying to come together and work together.
Ultimately, I ended up working as a police officer with these people for about 10 years in the Dearborn South End. And it was from this that I started to realize certain problems that were cast on the Arab American people.
That's it, fellas. We'll see you on the streets.
From what I've seen in the police department, there's an air of what they call joking around about people's ethnic backgrounds. They joke about everybody's backgrounds, and they felt that Ankeny took it too seriously.
It would be like between 15 and say 25 times a day I'd be called desert nigger or raghead or this or the camel jockey, and it kept increasing till finally it reached a peak when Mayor Guido ran for mayor. I mean, he was so blatant and rude in his political campaign that he used hatred of the Arab Americans to promote his election campaign.
There is a definite point in this campaign where the campaign became negative. And that point was when the Guido camp put out a piece of literature that was, well, let's just describe it this way, that on the second page in big black type said Mike Guido is anti-Arab.
I think it's a misconception of a brochure that was that we put out during the campaign that dealt with what we called the Arab issue and some of the undercurrent that the community had felt or sensed at that time.
As I address the issues, some of which are very controversial, but squarely in the eye and identifying my solutions to the problem, I felt that was important for the people of this community to at least know how Mike Guido felt on issues.
The Arab Anti-Discrimination League, ADC, will refer to this sometimes if they're sending out appeal letters for donations, you know, remember Mayor Guido, like remember the Maine, you know, remember Iwo Jima and things, you know, remember Mayor Guido, and then everybody sends money.
Did the chief call back by chance?
I'll check. Okay. All the top officials are appointed by Mayor Guido. Some of them I'm working under. And Mayor Guido's perspective of Arab Americans has to also be reflected in his appointees. Ultimately, I had to take a stand, and I knew the consequences of my stand. I knew they'd be severe, and they've proven to be severe, both for myself and my wife.
The first day that I started coming to work, I opened up the Detroit Free Press, and I heard about the Ankeny trial. His attorneys were trying to show that he was in an atmosphere where there were racial slurs, poor treatment of the Arab American community. I was real shocked at such strong accusations and mistreatment of a community. He had to work in this environment, and it was one in which his superiors allegedly didn't care about when they were told. He won the case that he was subject to a hostile work environment, and he was awarded $30,000 by a jury.
If anyone lives in a hostile work environment, it's the mayor. If he doesn't have his constituents beating him up, he has the city council beating him up, you know. But I can't run to federal court and seek relief. I just decided not to run for re-election.
When I did challenge it, when they knew I had a lawsuit, it immediately stopped from being called desert nigger and raghead and camel jockey, say from 25 times a day, almost down to 5 times a day. And then ultimately, when I won the lawsuit for discrimination, it stopped. I have not heard one comment since then. How long it's going to last, I don't know.
All along he was fighting for you, and he didn't even know your name. Young men come and young men go, but life goes on just the same. And I don't know why do we keep holding on? I don't know why, pretending to be oh so strong. Oh, why is there something I don't know? Something very wrong with you and me, or maybe that's the way it is.
I was actually pointing the finger and saying that you're conducting a racist, bigoted administration, which he didn't want to have.
I think we've crossed a lot of bridges with the community. They understand that my job is to enforce the laws equally and fairly throughout the community, and I've done that. I think that they felt that they would be singled out in my administration, and I've been very careful not to do that. But if I do have a problem or an issue with anyone in the community, I'll go right to them. And we've established a good relationship, I think.
I don't know how advanced stage people are at in willing to work with the Arab community, how much interaction they want. But I see city and school officials really making efforts, both with bilingual programs and the mayor's efforts to improve the community down there. I have yet to see how serious Guido is on that.
That's the way it is.
We came here in March of 1974. We came to the States. Before that, my family and I lived in Kuwait. It's just, it was hard for my mother. My mother was home all the time, you know, didn't communicate with anyone, would cry all the time because she was homesick.
No, thank you.
My father was going to work. He worked for Ford Motor Company on the assembly line. And when we first came here, we lived in Dearborn Heights. And there was no Arabs at all. I mean, nobody knew what an Arab was. But actually, people were very friendly, very nice. We adjusted to the ways in the U.S. very well, I guess because we were all very young when we came here. I myself was 7 years old. But we still kept our culture and our ways and our religion. My family and I are Muslims, and we're not fanatics about the Muslim religion. We believe in God very much. We might not pray 5 times a day, but I consider ourselves decent people. There's a lot of peer pressure. It creates problems, I guess, if you let it create problems. There's pressure from all over television, especially fashion and everything else. You kind of have to give up a little. You really do, in order to maintain and work and communicate in a different country.
They've been waiting for word to come down. They've been waiting for you night and day. They won't wait any longer for you. It may already be too late. And I don't know why do we keep holding on? I don't know why, pretending to be oh so strong. Oh, why? Is there something I don't know? Something very wrong with you and me? Or maybe that's the way it is.
You've just seen 3 fairly typical stories which illustrate the difficulties faced by some Arab Americans. The Detroit metropolitan area is home to the largest community of Americans with Arab roots. Arab Americans, like other groups, have been part of the great American mainstream for many years. The culture of the melting pot challenges them to make adjustments to their traditions, values, and practices. However, in the case of Arab immigrants, this assimilation is made more difficult by unfavorable perceptions, perceptions which often lead to resentment and discrimination of Arab Americans. Now we're going to talk about the culture of Arabs in metropolitan Detroit, give you the facts which challenge commonly held myths. We'll find out what impact Arab Americans have in the political arena, how American public policies affect Arab Americans, and finally, we'll look at the bread and butter issues. Are there enough jobs for all new immigrants? Will immigrants from the Middle East and others improve the American economy or hurt it? And will ethnic groups be pitted against each other for jobs, job training, and social services? Or will they work together? With me to discuss these important issues are Osama Siblani. Osama is the editor and publisher of Sada Al-Watan. That's the national Arab American newspaper. We have with us Dr. Aliyah Rushdie. Dr. Rushdie is professor of Middle Eastern Studies here at Wayne State University. And Mr. Michael Sarafa. an urban policy consultant, an administrative assistant to the Michigan House Republican leader, and finally, Ishmael Ahmed, Executive Director of Access. That's the Arab Community Center for Economic and Social Services in Dearborn. Ladies and gentlemen, with the panel, I'd like to ask you, first of all, if you would be so kind, starting with you, Dr. Rushdie, to comment on the documentary, your impressions of what was seen here tonight.
First of all, I would like to correct one thing. I'm sure this film was made before the new census came up, that now there is the Arab American are recognized as an ethnic, having their own ethnic identity, and they are not listed as Caucasian anymore. So this is the new census, so that everybody should know that. So then we can move on to something that I was impressed by listening to Terry Ahwer mentioning the language, her language, that she became fluent in English here because she became she came here as a child. And then speaking of language, both of them mentioned, also Huwaida mentioned the same thing, that she learned English here as a child, and she has no accent. Both of them have no accent. So maybe later in the discussion I would like to bring up something which is very disturbing regarding the use of language and ethnic language, bilingualism and bilingual education. Maybe later, after commenting on the film, we can discuss this, which is very important.
Yeah, bilingual education continues to be an important
the new
topic.
proposal of having English as the official language of the United States and its repercussions and so on, which are very interesting point to be brought up.
All right, moving on, Ishmael.
Yeah. But
excuse me.
No, I was going to mention that also someone mentioned that there was one thing missing, that there are also other aspects of our group here in this city or as Arab American that was not portrayed, and maybe we can bring this up later too. Other, like professional, somebody mentioned profession weren't portrayed in this film, so that should be discussed too.
Ishmael.
I guess from my point of view, I'm very proud of this documentary. It's a fair, although no half-hour documentary can be a comprehensive representation of our community. It brings up some questions that I think are worth looking at. While many Arab Americans have done well, a large number of Arab Americans, particularly immigrants, have not done well in America. Where do they fit in? Another question is that by the year 2020, the majority in America's population will be minorities, or what's now called minorities. And the majority of those minorities will be language minorities, Hispanic, Arab American, Asian, etc. What then does that mean when we add the economic problems to it in terms of alliances and the way forward? And finally, I think something that was talked to is worth looking at more closely. The Middle East, the place where Arab Americans come from, is between Asia and Africa. And because of that, we come from the area where the first language, the first cities, and the first human being came from. Should we look to that tradition and the struggles that continue in those countries for inspiration? Should we work to be a linkage to the rest of the world? Those are questions that come out of this documentary.
Thank you. Michael.
Jack, I thought it was an outstanding documentary. 3 shining examples of Arabs that came here under different circumstances, who all in some way contributed to the Arab American community, but also to the larger community. And I think they're the rule rather than the exception. While Ish is right, some people have been left out of the American dream. I think that most Arab Americans that come here are large contributors to society, not just ours, but the larger society. You made a comment at the beginning and was referred to in the documentary about party stores. I'm a Chaldean American also, and quite honestly, most of my relatives and most of other Chaldean people, or a large percentage, still do own party stores. But we're very proud of that fact. We contribute to the economic climate of Michigan. We employ, we're one of the largest employers as a whole in the area. We pay taxes and contribute to the neighborhoods and communities in the areas where our stores are. And so while I say that in one breath, the other breath is that we are more and more graduating accountants, engineers, scientists, lawyers, and doctors, and a new generation is coming forth. But we're a very young immigrant group. Most people are either first or second generation. Where there are third and fourth generations are mostly very young kids still. So I think we've accomplished quite a bit in a very short period of time.
Osama?
Well, I think, Jack, the documentary it's an excellent documentary giving the complexity of the issue, the Arab Americans in the Middle East and all what surrounds it. But what's important about this documentary, it shows clearly to the people that have already made up their mind what Arab is, it shows them that the Arabs are not nothing but a human being. They're like their neighbor next door. And I think another thing that we should emphasize on, that the Arab population in the metropolitan Detroit area is growing, is not going away. And I think our American neighbors should realize that we're here to stay and we're going to be part of this country. We are a part of this country, and we would like to contribute to the success of the neighborhoods, and we would like to become part of this melting pot, which is called America. And I think it shows a great deal that we are a human being like any other Americans. And we're seeking the opportunity that this great country gives its citizens.
Well, thank you, Osama. I think that some of the comments from the panelists, particularly concerning occupation, merit our attention, namely mutual respect, regardless of what a man or woman does on the job. One of my proudest moments, I think, was pumping gas and also working at a grocery store at the same time. And there are moments that I cherish. And when we start thinking that in order to be a professional, namely white-collar worker, that puts you at a certain status, then I think we're in trouble as a nation. It's the different contributions that we make and how we handle those contributions that are extremely important. Osama, I'd like you to address the issue of politics and how that affects the image of Arab Americans. And then I'm going to open questions up from our panelists here in the guest audience, the distinguished panelists that we have here. Will you speak to that, please?
Well, I think politics, there is a saying in Arabic says that if more than two Arabs gets together, the third one is politics. A topic which is very, very important because of the issues that we face and because of the problems that we live in every day, in the Middle East and in here. Politics is in every Arab blood. It is something that we drink, we eat, we live on a daily basis. Why? We have problems. And in every country that in the Middle East, we have 22 nations now. We have a Palestinian nation, so we have 22 nations. And in each nation, we have a problem. The immigrants, they come from the Arab world, they come here, they bring their problems. Now, these are problems that we import with us in here because of our political motivation. Now, there are other problems that we face here. And the political problem that we face here, we came to this country and we're facing a stereotyping imaging for the Arabs, distorted image of the Arab. Why? Because we have a problem with the pro-Israeli lobby. The pro-Israeli lobby.
Hold it there, the pro-Israeli lobby. Does anyone here have a comment? Do you really think that that has an effect on what Osama is talking about? Any questions or any observations on that statement from the studio audience? Anyone here to my right or to my left?
I think, Mr. Shaheen, I think without question, I believe all of us can agree that the pro-Israeli lobby and those that have succumbed or submitted to the influence of their machinations on the national or local or state level has become something clear and of great concern to us as Americans. For our part, I believe most of the audience today is comprised of Americans of Arab descent, and I am very proud of my heritage, although I am an American born. But I am saying that for us to turn away, to avert our eyes, to refuse to recognize a truth that stands out clearly would be, I believe, an inconsistency on our part.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or observations on this particular issue?
Jack, well, it's just more than that. I mean, as one watches movies and see what Hollywood is doing, the Arab is being portrayed as being a terrorist. I mean, nothing positive about the Arab person is being shown on the American media networks or in the movie theater. I mean, a wonderful culture, 5,000 years old, has given most of learning to mankind, is never even mentioned.
And when you say movies, can you give me the name of a movie or two that you saw, or there's so many that you can't remember the titles?
Well, a TV-made movie was America Under Siege, where they portrayed terrorist acts here in America, and Dearborn, Michigan in particular. I just want to make a statement. There has never been a terrorist act committed in America by any Middle Eastern person. And yet, the American people, through the advent of television and movies, believe that we are under siege. And it's a big lie.
Do you think that the image of the Arab over there has a telling effect on the image of Arab Americans over here?
Well, Jack, if I may
yes,
comment on this, the pro-Israeli lobby is feeding the lies about Arab Americans, distorting the image. But again, the Arabs are the new guys on the block. We came from an area that is relatively new to the Americans, the Middle East. We came from an area that we have Muslims. The Islam was never heard of in America. So this is the new thing that the Americans have to discover. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately because the Islam has been presented to the Americans by the media in a way that has distorted Islam and distorted the image of Islam. And it has connected the Arabs to Islam. One thing that about this lie...
On Islam, you have to excuse me. I know that we have a specialist here in the studio audience on Islam, I can tell.
But I would like to say one thing.
Is this true about... I just want to give someone from... I'll get back to you, Osama, excuse me.
No problem.
The Arab, you know, whenever they mention the Arab in the newspaper or on TV over here, it comes to everybody's mind that they are Muslims, and they don't understand Islam.
Well, aren't all Muslims Arabs? I thought all Muslims were Arabs.
No, the Muslims, the Arab, a great deal of them are not Muslims, and the Muslims are all over the world. There is only 120 million Arab in the world, and there is about 800 million Muslims all over the world.
And about 50 million Muslims in the Soviet Union, right?
There is, yes. And wherever they are, and they mention their name, that they fight in the Armenian Christian. They always say Muslim and Christian. Make it sound to the average American, the ordinary people, that the Muslims are fighting Christian. And there is no religion that teach fighting and teach animosity. Islam is the word of obedience to God. Islam is the only religion that it's a completion for all other revelation from God. Anything that was revealed from the days of Adam to the prophet Noah, to the prophet Abraham, to the prophet Moses and his brother Aaron, to the prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, to the prophet Muhammad, the final of the prophet, is the completion of all revelation from God. And Islam endorsed the Judaism and endorsed the Christianity. Yes. Islam, really, I have one more word to say. I am from the Islamic Center of America, and the Islamic Center, we are gifted that we have a religious leader, our beloved Imam Shari, who taught us the religion, who taught this language in the English language for the American born. And if we are, as Muslim American, if we practice our religion and we just fulfill it, we are a good example. We are Allah obedient. We are a good citizen, we are trustworthy, we are honest, we are decent, we are clean, and there won't be no sickness and no disease and no robbery and no killing. There'll be peace, and that's what Islam is about.
One of the commonly held omissions is that the similarities between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. And I think the statements that you've just made now bring those about in terms of peace and in terms of respect for our Creator. Any other comments on Islam and how it may or may not relate to the image of the Arabs, not only over there, but over here? Would you stand, Barbara, please?
I think in the West, our history has often been very distorted. We've had about 1,400 years of relations with the Middle East, and many of them in Europe were very competitive. If we really look at history, and we don't in our textbooks, we would know that there were so many contributions that came out of the Arab 600 years of scientific and literary
what did the Arabs, I thought most Arabs lived in the desert and tents. And what kind of contributions?
That's what we get in the
Like, for
textbooks.
example,
Yes.
if I were in your classroom,
Yes.
what would you tell me about Arab contributions?
Well, certainly the first university. I teach in a university. The first university was in Egypt. The idea of clinics and contagious diseases was first in the Middle East. We have the first outlining of the nervous system, a lot of anatomy, astronomy, all these extremely important contributions, which were sort of glossed over in high school. If we remember much of it, it's very unusual. And then, of course, with the Crusades coming in, we have from that time on, I think, a very antagonistic, anti-Islamic period in our history that comes to the West.
Is that because most of what we read about the Crusades comes from a Westerner rather than from the people who were actually victimized by the Crusades?
I think that's how we write our history books, isn't it? Also, then we don't really study colonialism in our history books. And the Middle East people have come out of the Third World. They've come out of a colonial situation, and we don't read that. We don't study it. And of course, I'm for trying to get that back in our textbooks and get it back in our schools. Then we can understand the history of people who've come out of situations being oppressed by the British and French, and now Israelis, and caught in the American-Russian rivalry. And this is part of the background of people coming in here.
Yeah, I think education, again, being the key. One final comment on Islam and whether it contributes to the image of American Arabs or also to the image of Arabs. Anything else? Anyone else? Yes, please.
Well, I'd like to mention the dominant role that Islam plays in our thinking in this country, and I believe all over the earth. And if I could pinpoint one thing, or maybe allowed to make emphasis on one point, I would select or choose the concept that we are all from the same God. This is what we are taught as Muslims. Muslim, Christian, and Jew are accountable to him on the judgment day for the amount of good they did, and not for their lineage, for their nobility, for their status, for their wealth. Therefore, if we could at least embrace this fundamental principle, I believe we would eliminate a lot of that which besets mankind, and I believe it would be a doorway, an avenue, some means of achieving that long sought for peace.
Thank you. Usama, since you brought this subject up, we'll conclude this segment of the show with your perceptions about Islam and politics. Are they related? Do they have an effect?
Yes, they do, because the media have made this connection. Islam is a religion. Arab is a nationality. You could be an Arab and you could be Christian. As a matter of fact, the Arab American community in here, the majority of it, the vast majority, I would say, it's like 70% or 75% of the Arab Americans are Christians. They're not Muslims. Again, the connection was made by the media, and there is no connection between Arab and Islam, except that you could be an Arab and you could be a Muslim, you could be an Arab and you could be a Christian, you could be an Arab and you could be a Jew. We have a lot of, Jews in the Arab world, and they're still living in Syria and Yemen and in Iraq, in Lebanon. So what we have to tell that we are a human being. We could believe in Islam, we could believe in Christianity or in Judaism, we could be atheists, but yet we are Americans now from an Arab ancestry.
I think we'll take a break now, and when we come back, we'll look at economics.
Myth: all terrorists are Arabs. Fact: a recent congressional study determined that only 19% of all terrorist activity around the world was committed by Arabs. Did you know that John Sununu, the chief of staff for President George Bush, is of Lebanese descent and is a former governor of New Hampshire? Composer and singer Paul Anka is of Syrian descent. He is married to an Egyptian and has 4 daughters. 55-year-old consumer advocate Ralph Nader is a Lebanese American. He is a graduate of Princeton and Harvard Law School. Egyptian-born Dr. Farouk El-Baz is a world-renowned space geologist. He is a research director at the Smithsonian Institution's Center of Earth and Planetary Studies.
Economics. Economics. Michael, Arab entrepreneurship, myth or reality?
Reality, Jack. There's no question about it. There's a tremendous entrepreneurial spirit in the larger Arab American community. Again, I can speak from my own experience as a Chaldean American that most of the 40-some thousand Chaldean Americans in the metropolitan Detroit area are entrepreneurs. They came to this country now as either first generation or some second generation Arabs, and have contributed to the economic structure of Michigan and of the country through entrepreneurship. Yes, party stores, some other kinds of small businesses, but mostly party stores. And a specific contribution in the last, say, 10 or 20 years of the Chaldean community economically has been staying in Detroit where there was a need for food supply and food retailerships, when most of the other entrepreneurs and the larger white community was abandoning the city. The Chaldean Americans have stayed with Detroit, providing a very valuable service.
Well, when we say entrepreneurs, give me some examples. Do you know any entrepreneurs here in the area? Anyone
Mr. Woody, Jack.
Still with me?
Mr. Woody.
Mr. Woody knows. Where's
Mr. Woody is an entrepreneur.
I didn't know Mr. Woody was an entrepreneur. You want to speak to that, Mr. Woody? Huh? Would you stand up, please? Let me help you up here. Excuse me.
Sam is my public relations director. Thank you, Sam. My name is Woodrow W. Woody, President of Woody Pontiac Sales, Michigan senior Pontiac dealer. Been established there 50 years, and happy to tell you that the world has been very fair and kind to me and to my wife, and we want to thank our heritage, which is Lebanese. I was born there, came here when I was 4 years of age. Yeah, I saw newspapers, Osama. In this great, big, beautiful, wonderful world of ours, there's so much for everybody that we should never have to quarrel over its division, and most certainly never have to go to war over it. Now, to get back to our Arabic people, I am a member of the American Arab Task Force, American Task Force for Lebanon. That's the name of it, American Task Force for Lebanon. There are 100 people there from all over the United States. These men are the top affluent citizens of this country, from millionaires to multimillionaires, and doing a tremendous job to bring peace in the Middle East through diplomacy and through friendship, which is the only way they can bring peace there. And I hope somebody will listen to their philosophy. Sit down on a conference table sincerely and discuss friendship and settlement of the issues through diplomacy.
Woody, a man with your experience and the amount of time that you've spent in this country, why do you think the discrimination or the images have accelerated against the Arab peoples? Do you see any reason for it?
Because of the hatred. Hatred begets hate. And that's the evil that's taking place right now in this world. And it seems that it's all over religion. The Christians are fighting Christians, the Muslims are fighting Muslims, and the Christians and Muslims are fighting Syria, and it's just a bedlam of confusion and distortion. There's so much for everybody, we should never have to quarrel over it. It's a beautiful world.
Thank you.
And there's so much for all of us.
Thank you. I think you're a good example of that. Thank you very much. What about Arab entrepreneurs, though? I mean, we have one. I'm going to see Woody about a Pontiac later on and see if we can do something. Ishmael, what do you think?
I'd like to talk to the other side of it. Entrepreneurship is only one part of the economic situation of Arab Americans. I live in a neighborhood where there are 60,000 Arab Americans within a 5-mile radius. In that neighborhood, never less than 30% are unemployed. At times, 50% have been unemployed. It's a neighborhood with a 38.5 per thousand infant mortality rate. So while there is a very successful aspect of the Arab community, there are many who are disenfranchised, who do not have a place in the American success story. While many of them are new immigrants, many of them have been here many years. I think that we need to begin to address, really not only in the case of Arab Americans, but other minorities, a whole underclass. It's an underclass that's growing and becoming a larger proportion of the United States by all demographics. So while there are many Arab Americans who are successful, and I would encourage those Arab Americans to come and help those who are in need, you know, there are many more who are having their difficulties as well. And I think that needs to be pointed out.
Jack,
why do you think, yes, go ahead,
that's a good point that Ish ends up with there, and that is that what is successful about the Arab American community is just one small percentage of the potential that is there, not only to help ourselves, but to help the larger community around us. And politically speaking, again, our ability to affect change in this country, not just on Middle East policy, but domestically, and I think we need to be less single-issue orientated and more orientated towards political empowerment here at home, is just a small percentage of what we can do. The amount of Arab Americans nationally tapped politically and for things like the social services and labor is very small. We have much more to offer. We have a long way to go towards becoming a better organized ethnic community.
Yeah, but the unemployment rate, Ishmael, what reason do you have for that? Why is it so high? Or is it so high because many people, not only Arab Americans, but other groups in this area are unemployed?
Well, let me first say that I agree with Mike. I think that there is much potential in our community, but I wanted to point to a larger question. The larger question goes back to those demographics I was talking about. The description of America in the year 2020 will not be that just that the majority of Americans will be minorities, Black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, Arab, but they in fact will be poor. And that there is a division in America I believe we have to address. I think Mike has suggested one way. I think there are many others that need to be looked at as well.
Well, Aliyah, what about language? Does language play a role in this unemployment issue? Is that significant? Is that something we should look at?
Definitely, language is very important.
Now, why is that?
Well, first of all, when people who come here, immigrants who come here at first, it's very hard. They agglomerate in one area, and they speak to each other in their language, which is Arabic. Of course, in order to be able to work, they have to learn the language of the country. And this is one of the things which is really having people, or in general, American, react toward minorities, not only Arabs, let's say Italian, or who, any group of people who speaks a different language in the country. And there is a very strong motion now, which is called English as an official language. It's an organization which was started by Senator Hayakawa in California and John Tanton, who is a physician. So it's not by people who are anti-minority or anti-racist or anything like that. They are educated people who think, and they have a goal. They think that the U.S. has to have an official language in the Constitution, written as an official language, and they are opposed to any bilingual education, and we can address this later, or also oppose the use of bilingual services in public sector. Now, this, of course, is going to affect these people who are coming here. They don't know the language, and they just need some help. I am not saying that in order, you have to maintain the language, you have to maintain it as an ethnic language, but you also have to learn the English language. So, there is a problem that we have to face in a community like Dearborn. How are we going to approach the adults who are here and they want to have a good job and they cannot use the language? So this is one of the problems that we can
Jack, there is a problem in here that we have not really tackled. The Arab American community, I will characterize it in two portions. First, the immigrants, like Mr. Woody, for example, here in our audience, that came when he was 3 or 4 years old. He immigrated with his parents or with his relatives to the United States. Those people, they have sought immigration to to improve themselves, to seek other opportunities. Now, what we have in here, the other portion, okay, what we have in Dearborn, for example, in particular, Dearborn, we have a influx of immigration. They are refugees. They came not seeking an opportunity, but they came here running away from war and destruction, and they come to for a refuge here in the United States. So this is where the problem exists. Now, if we take the Arab Americans that they immigrated to this country seeking opportunity and work, they have succeeded to a great extent, because one of the example is Mr. Woody. We have in here, we have a lot of other lawyers, doctors. Actually, a lot of doctors, they run the hospitals in the Metro Detroit areas. You know,
let me play devil's advocate and go to Aliyah. Do you?
Yeah, they have succeeded because they learned also the language very well. It's very important in order to succeed in the economic and social aspect of American life to learn the language.
That's what the refugee has to learn to succeed in America.
Exactly. Let's go here to the guest audience and see whether they think bilingual education is the answer to unemployment, or are the roots a little deeper than that?
I have to interject a note here. When I speak about bilingual education, is the bilingual education in the school system, which it's not bilingualism. Okay, so maybe we can...
Bilingual education in the school system. Any comments on that?
Yeah, Jack.
Wait, just a moment. Please stand.
Okay, I would just like to say, as someone that grew up in Dearborn and someone who was born here, I had many more opportunities than a lot of people. I had an opportunity to go to college. Women and girls now have more opportunities than they ever had. I'd also like to say that many immigrant groups have started in the south end of Dearborn, not knowing a word of English. Many of them pulled their resources together to open up stores. What is different now is that the Ford Rouge plant is no longer an opportunity for people to work. We are not a lazy people. We would like to work, but we need opportunity. As far as bilingual education is concerned, I think it acts as a bridge. Just think of yourself as a little child coming here, just knowing your native language, to have someone there to speak to you in that language and to give you a reference point of what those words mean. That's where it starts.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was for the Italians, the Polish people, Germans, our predecessors.
Yeah, may I add something?
Good comment. Doesn't that, Michael, tie into entrepreneurship? If you're bilingual, I mean, after all, we've been criticized by other countries for only speaking one language. And isn't that a strength if we speak several, regardless of whether it's English and Arabic or English and Polish or English and Yiddish, whatever the language happens to be?
Absolutely, Jack. One of my biggest regrets, and I joke about it with my parents as to whose fault it is, but I don't speak either the Arabic or the Chaldean language fluently, and I find myself now at this point where I should have learned it already, regretting that.
I just want to comment on the professor's comments about bilingual education. As long as bilingual education had a color attachment to it, Orientals, Hispanics, Arabs, it was thought of as being negative. But watch when the Eastern Europeans come.
That's right.
And they're white. And bilingual education has a white face, all of a sudden it will be okay. So what I'm saying is that there are social dimensions of skin tone applied to everything in this country. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
Well, perhaps we'll learn in time that, as is written in the Bible, in the Torah, in the Holy Quran, that all mankind is one family in the care of God, and we shouldn't take into consideration one's color. And I'm going to close. We'll go for a break. But before we do that, I just have a quick comment from Dr. Rushdie.
There are many, I mean, the bilingual program has many, problem, I have to say, but you have to address, first of all, the nature of the language. Let's take Arabic. We have a very big problem in Arabic, the language itself, the diagnostic nature of the language. So we have to set a right program for those children to be able to lead them from one level to the other. And then, but not to denigrate their own language. This is the most important thing. So let the child learns English and he become fluent. And we have all those young people, Terry, this young lady, they have no accent. So let them be proud of their ethnic language too. So you keep that as a language, as a second language in schools, for instance. But let's keep those bilingual program or bilingual education programs until the students reach a certain level.
Yeah, those are good points. Thank you. Any other questions or observations? Yes.
I think in addition to what Dr. Rushdie said and also to what Don said, Don first mentioned the fact that skin tone is going to play in the coming years and has in the past play a part in this. And I think Dr. Rushdie also alluded to it, Terry in the documentary alluded to it, and that is that without the accent, that is if people are given the chance to learn English and express themselves well in English, they are then going to be able to make other people understand who Arabs are, who they are, where they come from, what their culture and their history and their traditions and everything are all about, which will lead, I think, to a lessening of the stereotypes and an improvement of the situation.
You think
overall.
having an accent hurts?
I'm afraid it does. I think it does. As much as I would hate to say that, and I would like to think that that's not true of myself, but I don't think that that's true of everyone.
What if you have a French accent?
Oh, that's romantic,
cute.
and it's...
So there are different standards for different
Sure,
accents.
I think that's true.
Okay, thank you. All right, don't go away. We're going to come back in a moment and talk about public policy and immigration.
Myth. All Arabs own party stores or gas stations. Fact. A majority of Arab Americans are in the professional field or have a skilled trade. Among the 3 million Arabic people in the U.S., only 20% own stores. Former teacher and astronaut Krista McAuliffe was a Lebanese American who gave her life in service to the U.S. space program in 1986 during the Challenger space shuttle tragedy. Detroit's own Woodrow Woody of Woody Pontiac Sales, the oldest active Pontiac dealership in the U.S., rose from newspaper delivery boy to car salesman. This businessman and philanthropist was born in Lebanon. Football sensation Doug Flutie is an Arab American. As a quarterback at Boston College, he broke the all-time college passing record and went on to become a Heisman Trophy winner. He is a quarterback with the New England Patriots. Son of a Lebanese immigrant, radio disc jockey, and television host, Casey Kasem was born in Detroit. In 1981, Kasem became the first disc jockey to have his star placed on the Hollywood Boulevard Walk of Fame.
Immigration and employment, are they related? Let's ask Ishmael.
I think they're very much related. I mean, the United States has always had, to be nice about it, a racist immigration policy. They've limited historically the kinds of people that can come to the United States, from what countries they come from, to mainly Europe, and in particular Western Europe. That's changed. The majority of immigrants now arriving in the United States are people from what's commonly known as third world countries, people of color. And I think along with that, the United States itself has changed. The United States that was highly successful, I'm not saying America is not a successful economic entity anymore, has also changed. We see the Rust Belt in the Midwest. We see factories closing in Detroit. A lot of the standard kinds of jobs that were open to new immigrants are no longer open to them. So the story, well, we're just one more group of immigrants arriving, and it's a matter of 3 to 5 years before we find the job, and a half a generation before all our children go on to college, and then from there all become scientists and corporate leaders, is not so true anymore. Not that there are not some, but I think immigration policy, now that we're a world power, we are reaping the results of that. People from the places that we are now involved in are coming here in the tens of thousands, war-torn areas. Vietnam, the Middle East, Latin America. Now that sounds like a list not only of new immigrants, but places where we've been involved in terms of foreign policy.
Do you think that our foreign policy, not foreign policy, but our policy of admitting Arabs into the United States has been a fair one?
No, I don't.
Why not?
I think that because of our large involvement in the Middle East, many Arabs are now homeless and refugees. They've arrived here in the United States with no refugee status. That's only been reserved mainly for what is considered the, in quotes, allies, and Arabs are not considered allies, so they are not treated with these special groupings. When they arrive, they have difficulty reuniting their families. In our center, we run an immigration center.
But wait a minute, we're letting them in, aren't we? I mean, we're letting Arabs in from these war-torn
That's
countries.
what I...
How can you say
we
we're
are,
not being
Jack.
fair?
That's where...
As a devil's advocate, I ask you.
I disagree with this.
Osama.
All right, if you let me disagree with him for one time, if you would let me disagree with him. I disagree with him. I think the United States policy on immigration is fair. I say fair, and I wanted to qualify it. In a war-torn area like Lebanon, for example, if you let everybody there, if you give everybody there a chance to immigrate, we will have 3.5 million Lebanese in Dearborn. So I think in this essence, it's fair. I think when I came in to this country, I was treated fair. I think foreign policy has something to do with it, of our immigration policy, but yet, taking this into consideration, I think the immigration policy is very fair, and they treat Arabs like any other nationalities.
Okay, I'm going to ask Gina what she thinks of this issue. Gina?
Well, I can add that that Arabs are, insofar as immigration policy is concerned, I think that Arabs are treated just like a whole lot of other folks, which is to say the Latino community, the African population that emigrates here, Caribbean community. I do immigration casework in my job, and while this is not scientific, I think we're all treated equally badly. And that is because of the numbers of these minority groups, which are, or people of color, if you will, who come through the office looking for help with immigration, who are trying to get visas, who are trying to bring a relative in because of a particular situation in any one of those countries. Probably 90%, and I'm sure this is no exaggeration, out of probably 20 to 30 cases a week, 90% are from those areas. And those are the problems. Those are the ones. The Europeans, in my experience, the European white immigrants do not have the kind of problems that the people of color do.
But isn't this related to the economy as well? In other words, if a Canadian or someone from England comes to Detroit and buys the Hotel Pontchartrain, there will be less of a murmur than if someone from, say, a Central American country or an Arab nation, or even someone from Vietnam came over and bought the Pontchartrain.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And you see that with figures like the sports stars, hockey players from Czechoslovakia and Nadia Comaneci and folks. It's the same.
Why is
idea,
that?
I believe.
Why is that? I mean, is it ignorance? Is it apathy? I'll ask someone
Maybe
else.
it is racism.
Jack?
I don't know. Why is that?
Jack, I don't necessarily accept the...
You disagree?
Well, not completely, but I don't necessarily accept the analogy to the Arab immigrants with other types of third world immigrants in every case. In cases like Osama is talking about, Arab refugees that come to Michigan, Dearborn, the Detroit area, have tremendous problems of unemployment and a fair shot at opportunity. However, because of the nature of Arab people and Arab Americans and the tradition and culture that we brought with us, or our forefathers have brought with us to this country, when immigrants come here of their own choosing, they have work because their family will help them out or their relatives will help them out. They have a place to stay till they can get their own place to stay, because they will be helped with their family. And so that part of the story is not the same as Latin Americans or other third world people that come to the United States.
Dr. Peter Ajluni, what do you have to say about this?
Well, I'm here as the Vice President of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, and we're wanting to dispel discrimination against all peoples, particularly Arabs. That's our special interest, but against all peoples. And every immigrant to this country experiences discrimination in one form or another. The Europeans much less, I'm sure, than those from third world countries. My father immigrated to this country over 50 years ago and opened a grocery store, a party store. I practice surgery in this area, and I'm not an anomalous person. There are many, many people in the medical community, in the business community, in the professional community that are of Arab descent. We're a part of the American greater thread work and network, and we contribute to this country.
You think we're all part of the Rainbow Coalition, so to speak?
Well, I don't...
Or is that divided unequal? Is it an unequal rainbow?
No, I think it is an unequal rainbow, yes. And we see that now with affirmative action that we're still debating in this country, and black people are still not getting a fair shake in this country, nor are the Arabs, nor are many other groups.
Jack, incidentally, Jesse Jackson, if you call him the president of the Rainbow Coalition, the organization, the vice president is Jim Zogby, a Arab American.
Yes. Well, don't you think, I think maybe part of it stems with the fact, I'll go to you, Aliyah, from the fact that instead of calling our students from other countries international students, we call them foreign students. Do you think that may color some of our perceptions of people come over and has an effect on some of the things we're talking about? Is foreign the appropriate term we should use? And is that a positive image as an educator?
I don't see anything wrong in that. I mean, it's applied to every... I was a foreign student once, and I don't see any problem right there, the difference between foreign student or international student.
As it relates to immigration, no problem.
I don't see
Okay.
that.
Thank you. Who else with immigration? Oh, some ladies in the back here. Excuse me. Yeah. Would you please stand? Sure. Excuse me.
I would also like to bring up a different area of discrimination that hasn't been touched upon, and that's Arab American women and discrimination. As a Chaldean American, I necessarily don't face the type of discrimination that certain Muslim women may face, but I do know that there are myths and misconceptions that Chaldean women marry early, we drop out of school, our main goal in life is to find a rich husband.
And have 12 children?
And have 12 children, not have any idea of family planning methods, which is a large misconception. As a Chaldean American woman, I can honestly stand here and tell you that there are a large majority of us that are educated, that work, that have careers outside of the home. But another issue that I think is very important is Muslim women. Not all Muslim women cover themselves. There are a lot of women that don't do that, but for those that do choose to dress in the traditional fashion, I think they're faced with extreme forms of discrimination that someone in my position could never understand. And I think Lila would be a perfect person to address
Lila?
that.
Does the way you dress have an effect on how others perceive you?
It did very much so in the beginning, but I find today that the people have learned to accept us for what we are and for who we are more so. But what I think is that the prejudices that are out there, the people have to deal with the fact that the women who do wear the hijab, the Islamic dress, it's more a liberation for them. So you have to learn to try to accept it, and knowing that with or without the education, they are going to be able to carry out that job. And I know that with me being out there, I'm nonstop.
You know, what amazes me is that women are always in the forefront with style and fashion and diversity. And it strikes me as unusual that if someone wants to wear a different garb, that they would be perceived in a negative way.
Well, I think that that would be, what could I say, my first priority. That would be me. As I've said once before, with the punk rockers, for instance, we're having to walk out there and take a look at the pink and purple hair, and that part is okay. It's accepted by the American public, but I'll wear a pink and purple scarf if you'll allow to accept it for that. You know, it's just the same. It's either way. I think we're all very capable of working and living together if they're just given the opportunity.
I think given an opportunity to say what you do and why you do it does more to debunk myths than anything.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jack?
Yes, Dr. Rushdie?
Two things. First, the first comment by the young Chaldean lady. I mean, she mentioned something which is typical Arabic, you know, that she is criticized by being, you know, like someone who wants to get married, have a lot of children. So this is typical Arab. It has nothing to do with Christian versus Muslim. So that's what I'm saying, that here people are just generalizing about what it is. Like the gentleman who told Terry Ahwal he cannot associate her with what's going on in the Middle East. associate, well, she seems different, you know, she seems modern, she is not, so, and the young Layla, I think, another thing, what's the difference between her and somebody who's an Orthodox Jew who's covered totally, or a conservative, or a Christian Arab, a conservative Christian Arab, who also put a scarf on her head?
Well,
I don't
did the
see
veil
any
start
difference.
with Christian Arabs? I always
Pardon
thought
me?
the veil was first worn by Christian women.
Veil, you want to call it veil, I call it scarf, because I don't
scarf.
see, or, you know, what's
Is that
the
true?
difference?
Isn't that true?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I think, Jack...
But it was done for a different reason, was it not?
yeah, well, the veil, or even the real veil, if you take Egypt, the veil was done because of the difference between classes, actually. It had nothing to do with religion at a certain time.
Right.
Now, of course,
But that's an
there is.
important statement. Most people don't know that, and I think it's important that you clarify.
Well, I think hijab is a new style to the American public. I mean, to me, if I see a woman with a hijab, you know, the veil, to me it's something natural. I've seen it back home. It doesn't really attract my attention. Now, for the American, average American, he looks at it like this is out of style, but I have something for you. It may be the style. I mean, if Madonna put the...
Yeah, that's interesting. If Madonna were to wear it,
it would be the style.
We need a music video with Madonna wearing the hijab. Is that what you're proposing, Osama?
No, I'm not proposing this. What I'm saying is this, that we have to give the American people a chance and time to understand what the veil is and why we wear the veil. We're not different. We're not strange. We're not coming from the moon. We came from a different area. We have our own ingredient, and this is what we are. So please accept us the way we are.
Yeah, good, thank you. We have another comment here.
Well,
would you stand, please?
Actually, I had one point, and then I changed it when I was listening to Osama, and that is, I found out through my existence here in the States that the system, with all the tools that's in it that shape the form of life in America, they do not go for something that's not unusual. Either you're supposed to look like I expect you to look, or otherwise you're different, so therefore you are like on the secondary, okay? As a matter of fact, I know some Americans who go overseas, they end up speaking English to the Arabs. I expect them to answer them back in English, even in their own land. I mean, that boggles me. And then they look at their food or something like that as something that a conversational piece, but not to be accepted as a way of life that is okay in its own way, and it is lovable, and you can live with it and love it, you see? So you go again to our schools, like, for example, which is one of the instruments that shape the society, and you find out that really knowing about other nations is the minimum. And then it is portrayed by some writer who the way he wants to shape certain people. I have kids in school, and I read their books to teach them, actually, or to study with them. And I found out, for example, that a nice picture is given to somebody who is blondish, or let's say an Israeli. All right? And yet a woman
or a Swede or a Finn.
Yes, but I'm talking about when they talk about the Middle East. Okay? So the field that is plowed neatly is an Israeli field, and yet a donkey behind him pulling, some kind of knife going through the earth, and a guy behind it is somebody from Egypt or Palestine, or even don't mention Palestine, from Jordan. So the way you portray the writing in the book, the student ends up at the very end of the semester, he ends up having this attitude of, well, who are those people? Again, the thing that looks real neat to him is something that he is familiar with here. And he's not given the attitude that you can be different and you can be good in your own way, and I could love you for that. He end up having an attitude against the Arabs. And I can see it in the students that are friends of my children at school. They look at it and they say, well, look what the book says. As a matter of fact, I had to bring it to the attention of the administration that you're describing the Palestinians as, the first word was terrorists. Well, give me a break. I mean, my kids, I don't want them to be growing up as Palestinians knowing that they are described as terrorists. Yet the book mentioned the first word about the Palestinians in their camps. It doesn't say why are they in their camps, what's the plight, why are they fighting for, what's the justice, injustice, etc. You see? So there is an attitude with the students themselves when they are children, and they carry it when they grow up.
I think the point of that statement, thank you, is that the noted journalist Edward R. Murrow always used to say, what we do not see, what we do not read, is often as important, if not more important, than what we do see, what we do read, the sins of omission and commission. Barbara, how do you feel about that? Do you feel that the textbooks are giving American children a distorted view of Arabs, and that has an effect on all of the issues that we've touched on this evening?
They've improved. I've been doing some reviewing of Michigan textbooks for the state. And there are improvements in that Islam is talked about quite extensively. Some of these attributes I mentioned that were left out before are in there. However, when we get, I'm thinking of the world history book that my son has, every other continent has a section on it under its colonial period. The Middle East does not. And it's incredible because you have Southeast Asia, you have Latin America, you have Africa, but this one, which is used throughout most of Michigan, it's generally a pretty good textbook, does not include the colonial history of the Middle East.
Why is that? Why is this excluded? Is it because of ignorance? Is it politics? What's the reason?
I think it's politics. Quite honest, I think it's politics.
Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to see if I can get someone else to agree or disagree. Is it politics? Is it left out because of politics, because of ignorance, because people don't know?
Yes, I'd like to comment on the talk about the covering the head and how the Muslim woman in this country. I believe we are gifted to be in this part of the world, in the United States. We have freedom over here to practice our religion and freely to say what we want, and we have things that are convenience over here. Covering the head is not all the religion, okay? It's how we conduct ourselves, how we prove to our neighbor and to our friend and to the American people that we are Muslims, we are honest, we pray 5 times a day, we don't steal, we don't lie, we don't commit adultery, we don't cheat, we respect the law, and we are a good citizen, you see. And there, the way we are organizing ourselves, us, the Arab, right now, in this Detroit metropolitan area, I give a credit to the ADC group. I give a credit to Mr. Siblani, to the Chaldean group, okay, to Access, and to the professional and the Dr. Rushdie, and anyone who is educated, anyone who is the Islamic Center of America. We have a great deal of responsibility toward educated people and toward making them a better American and finding job and learn. I am proud to be an American citizen. I'm a father of 9 kids. My wife and I, we raised 9 kids. And thank God that they are educated from college and they have jobs with General Motors on a high level.
I'm sorry.
And we are really, we have our chance and we have opportunity in this, and we thank America too. We thank God and we thank, that we are American.
I thank you.
Okay,
I'm sorry. The time seems to be moving by, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists for their keen insights, our studio audience for their participation, their excellent contributions. We'd like to close this program with a message that Americans are mutually dependent, that what injures one group injures all. As my dear friend Alex Oda said, stereotypes are lies, and lies are like dead ashes. But when the wind of truth blows, the lies are dispersed like dust and disappear. Thank you, and good night.
بسهام عيونه أمرني ويلي من سهم العيون.
As a follow-up to this broadcast, WTVS will offer a variety of resources and referral materials which can be used to learn more about Arab Americans.